My name is Adam Nevill and I write horror fiction. Torbay inspires me. For me, it's the landscape. It's the incredible horizon, the view out to sea, the coves, the beaches, the woods, the natural environment. Being in the fresh air, swimming, it just inspires me. And at times when I'm walking on the southwest coast path, or I found a really good cove to swim in, my imagination just becomes a kind of maelstrom of ideas. So I take a notepad with me, and I also carry a dictaphone when I'm walking down the southwest coast path, because I get transported by the landscape and by the light. The light is wonderful here, right through the winter. It's the first place I've lived since I was in New Zealand where I don't dread the winter at all. In fact, I enjoy all the seasons. And you get so much wonderful winter sunlight, which can be so intense. I just feel better. And I think if you feel better and your mind is stimulated and you're inspired by the environment that you live in, you know, it stands to reason that your creativity is enhanced as well. Yes, I wanted to write, going back years. Usually I think about a book for year after year after year, and the idea slowly distills and the story slowly distills, but I wanted to write a novel about the consequences of runaway climate change, but I didn't want to write a novel set too far in the future, because I think once you go past a certain time, it becomes fantasy and it becomes existential, and it's too easily to see it as a fantasy and not a real and ever-present and imminent threat that affects all life on the planet. And of course climate change does, and climate change is happening in a more extreme way and far faster than I think even some of the most extreme predictions that were made back in the 90s and so forth. So I wanted to write something about that, and set no later than the 2050s, and I tried to imagine the environment and the impact of climate change, and everything from, you know, overpopulation. The world's population will be 9 billion by then, freshwater shortages, soil degradation, rising sea levels, erratic weather patterns from extreme drought to storms and so forth. To imagine the consequences of that on 9 billion people on the planet. And there's 7 billion of us now who can't agree on anything, really. So what's it going to be like with 9 billion in the late 2040s, early 2050s, in a far more testing, challenging time because of the environment. So I had this idea, and it was when we were looking for a home here and we decided to settle in Torbay that I thought, this is where I'm going to set it. In these seaside towns where the landscape around it has been transformed by an enormous international refugee crisis. And it's odd because when I wrote the early drafts and researched it, it was pre the Syrian refugee crisis, it was pre-ISIS, and I have an organised criminal element in the novel called King Death, who refer to themselves as King Death, that I actually based on Mexican drug cartels, but bear an uncanny similarity to Daesh as we've seen them in Iraq and Syria. So by the time the book came out, and it's been out now for a couple of years, it is uncannily and weirdly in some ways prophetic, in that the book was set in the 2050s, but certain things have already happened. And I set it here in Torbay, and it's, you know, it is a dark book, but I hope it's one that's very exciting for the reader. It's the story of a father who becomes a vigilante, and about a war in a world falling apart, who's looking for his daughter who's kidnapped when she's young for the entire duration of the book. and he wanders through this dramatically changed landscape of the southwest, trying to find her. She was abducted. So that was Lost Girl. And Under Watchful Eye, I'd written two very dark novels, No One Gets Out Alive and Lost Girl, and I felt quite flat at the end of that period, that 3-year period of researching and writing them. I felt quite flat, and I thought, I worried that I wouldn't be able to write a book again that mattered as much to me as those two did. And so I returned to my roots and wrote a novel of psychic terror, a ghost story, very much in the style of M.R. James. That's how it started, but 6 months in, it had become an Adam Nevill book, and it's taken on a life of its own. And this is what stories and characters do. I'm not really a great planner. I have ideas and a few set pieces, and then I trust my imagination to take that and to create a world and to create a fully formed story. So I went back to my roots in the English ghost story and psychic terror, a book without excessive violence in it, a novel of, I suppose, a psychological thriller involving the paranormal. And I found Torbay and Dartmouth, again, a perfect setting for this kind of story that involves a cult and also psychic projection and out-of-body experiences, which fascinated me as a child and as a teenager when I used to read books about unexplained mysteries. I finally found a story in which I can bring that. And it starts above Broadsands in Paynton, half a mile from where I live, and it ends on Dartmoor. So that's Under a Watchful Eye. That's my second Torbay novel.